right now. There we go. So you'll have access to the session to listen to it later if you like. We'll share that with you. Okay. I want to send a big thank you to all of our partners that make this session and sessions like these possible. We provide many services across NTAC that are no cost to you. So we hope that we see you in other sessions, but we also have a newsletter. We also have a website that we keep updated with current information. We are going to be launching podcast series this year, so lots of great resources that are available to you at no cost. So we hope that you join in on all the fun that we have here at the center. There will be a certificate of completion for this event. We'll send a copy of this presentation. And if you need a certificate of completion, you can contact Joanne Bloom. Her email is listed here on the slide, and she can make sure that you have that certificate. Okay, so I am going to pass it over to the facilitators, the presenters of today, and allow them to introduce themselves. I've had the pleasure of working with Victoria for the past few years, and Carrie is phenomenal as well. So passing the mic over to them, I'm excited to hear more about Talk Save Lives.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley, for that introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone on our session today. I'm so thankful that you all have joined us. I am Victoria Eckert. I use she, her pronouns. I am located in Western New York. I'm about 90 minutes south of Buffalo, New York, and I am the Associate Director at Youth Move National. As Ashley said, I've been a part of the NTAC team for about 3 years now. I've been involved in national technical assistance and training work. I have also been involved in systems of care work for the past 13 years, and I also have subject matter expertise in suicide prevention, and I am a suicide loss survivor as well. Carrie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Carrie Rayner. I use she, her pronouns. I am the coordinator of the Suicide Prevention Alliance of Chautauqua County, also in Western New York, south of Buffalo. I have been working in the suicide prevention arena for about 11 years now, educating my community around suicide prevention and mental health awareness. I do sit on the board of directors for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, Western New York. I sit on the education committee for them. I also facilitate survivors of suicide loss support groups in person, and I do one nationally as well for Eric's House. I am a grief companion, so I also do grief work as well, and I'm also do many different fundraising activities in my area. So I'm super excited that you all are here to join us for Talk Saves Lives today. Thank you all for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Carrie. And so today we are going to give you a presentation on Talk Saves Lives. And this presentation is an introduction to suicide prevention. And as Carrie and I had both mentioned, we are both American Foundation for Suicide Prevention facilitators. So our first half of our experience today will be our Talk Saves Lives training. And our second half of our conversation today will be an overview of all of the free programming that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention offers across the country to schools and educators. Now, if you've joined our session today and you say to yourself, well, I'm not involved in schools or education work, no worries. You can stay with us throughout the presentation and then leave when we switch over and give the highlights. Everyone will receive copies of both of these presentations in PDF format. And you will also have a lot of links to visit as well that we will be dropping in the chat for you throughout our session today. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that, of course, we are talking about suicide prevention. I come into this space as a loss survivor. I come into this space with experience in storytelling, personal lived experience, family lived experience in the mental health system. And I just want to ensure that everyone takes a moment and centers ourselves, but also take very good care of yourselves during this presentation today. So as a reminder, we do have our support space open that Arctelos will join you in if you need. You can also turn off your camera if you'd like, and please take care of yourself in any way that you need. And so with that said, I'd like to start off with telling you a little bit about Talk Saves Lives. So if we think about suicide, understanding that suicide is complex. It is a public health issue. And if we think a little bit about public health issues, really what we are talking about is that suicide can affect anyone at any time, regardless of who we are, where we live, where we come from, our cultural background, what we do for a living, or how much money we make. And it's important to understand that the reason that this presentation exists is to be able to teach anyone in the community, regardless of our position, if we work in the helping field or not, how is it that we can recognize when someone is experiencing thoughts of suicide? And how is it, and as anyone in our communities across the country can have an open, direct conversation and feeling like they are prepared and getting that person to seek help or support. But we do know through research, despite its complexity, suicide can be prevented. So just like there are warning signs and risk factors for other health crises like cardiac arrest, we can learn the warning signs and risk factors that can help us prevent people from dying by suicide. And as with other health issues, prevention can start early, far in advance of the problem, or prevention can occur even closer to the time of crisis. But what we'll learn in this presentation today is that time can be a critical and life-saving measure. And typically, a life can be saved if you allow time for a person's suicide risk to subside and get through that period of distress to get the help that they need. And so we are going to look at the scope of the problem. So we'll look at some statistics and understand how many people the suicidal thoughts affect in the year. Research, what is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention doing in the field of research as a leading entity in the United States? What can you do to contribute to suicide prevention in your own community? And we will leave you with some information on how to have a direct conversation with someone that you are worried about. But first, before we start, I want to just have everyone think for a moment about how we talk about mental health and suicide matters. And so if we think about terminology and the impact of language and having conversations with people that may be struggling, this can be not only impactful on how someone views support and help in their relationship with that person, but it also can be life-saving. So as people who are trained in Talk Saves Lives and that are advocates for suicide prevention, it is important to model appropriate language so that we do not perpetuate the stigma of suicide or mental health conditions. So on the next slide here, some language do's and don'ts that will help us establish a baseline of shared language on this topic. We avoid using the phrase committed suicide as it can have a negative connotation. Instead, we encourage phrases like died by suicide, ended their life, or killed themselves. And when talking about suicide and suicide attempts, we avoid referring to suicide attempts as failed or successful. Not only is it unnecessary, but those words imply judgment. Instead, we encourage the use of phrases such as suicide attempt, suicide, or death by suicide. And as you can imagine, and I've learned this from my own, I grew up and I understood when maybe we didn't talk about suicide, but when we did, we talked about it in the way of the column here that we're trying to avoid today. And research has shown that when we use language on the right, not only are we educating people about the importance of talking about suicide, just like any other cause of death, but we encourage help-seeking behaviors, we raise awareness of risk in vulnerable populations, and we also advocate for new interventions and prevention strategies for those at risk. So when suicide is talked about safely and correctly and accurately, we can help reduce the likelihood of its occurrence. So talking a little bit about the scope of the problem here is that, of course, it's a significant issue that affects individuals, families, and communities worldwide. So we're going to talk about a few statistics that demonstrate the scope of the problem. And of course, as you can imagine, as I talked about right in the beginning, that suicide can affect anyone regardless of where you live, what position that you hold in the community, what you do for work, where you go to school. And this is considered to be a global problem. And according to the World Health Organization, each year over 800,000 people die by suicide worldwide. And while this is the most accurate data available, we estimate these numbers to be much higher since suicide is underreported in many countries across the world. So moving on, this works out to be about 40 seconds worldwide that someone dies by suicide. And in the United States, suicide rates are recorded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And according to the CDC, 45,979 people died by suicide in 2020. And while this is the most recent data available, again, we estimate these numbers to be much higher due to the underreporting mechanisms in many countries. And this makes suicide the 12th leading cause of death. And suicide takes more lives in the United States than homicide, war, and natural disasters combined. And these numbers are one of the many reasons that it is important to talk about suicide just like any other cause of death. The more we talk about it, the less stigmatized the idea is that we all face struggles and the need that support becomes. And of course, if we're thinking about suicide attempts, for every death by suicide that we know of, okay, keeping in mind it's underreported, we estimate that 25 others attempt suicide, which is about 1 million Americans a year who survive a suicide attempt. And when you think about any other loss, it impacts individuals, communities, all sorts of people where we live and who are connected to us. And suicide is no different. The loss affects family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, faith communities, and schools. It is estimated that the majority of Americans will experience a suicide loss over the course of their lifetime. So moving on to research. As I mentioned before, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, is the leading entity in the country for suicide prevention research. And only in the past several decades have scientists been studying suicide. Research is shedding light on many critical areas, such as what drives up risk and what amounts to effective suicide prevention, but we still have so much more to learn. The section provides an overview of suicide prevention research, key research findings, and future goals in the field. So one of the main questions research explores is, why do people take their own lives? And of course, there's no single cause. I think oftentimes we try to really make sense of a loss and try to understand someone's situation or what they've experienced, either physical or emotional pain. And research has taught us that there is no single cause for suicide. Most often occurs when there are several stressors and health issues that converge to create an experience of hopelessness and despair. And the large majority of people who die by suicide have a mental health condition contributing to their death. And research has shown us that oftentimes it may or may not have been recognized by that person or their loved ones, or it's possible that they have not been diagnosed or adequately treated or were receiving the support that they needed. We also know that research has also made clear that mental health and health conditions cannot be the only story. The vast majority of people who have health conditions do not die by suicide. And as you can see here on the slide, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health condition, and most do not go on to die by suicide. But we do know that in addition to mental health conditions, there are other factors that increase as risk as well. We've learned that the brains of people who die by suicide literally differ from those who die from other causes in 2 ways, in terms of structure and in function. Specifically, we look at areas of impulse control and stress response. Ashley, you can go to the next slide. Okay. Actually, you can go to after that, to 27. So if we are also continuing on with thinking about research, it is important that we understand as helpers that most people who are thinking of suicide are ambivalent. What does that mean, right? Ambivalence is that there are 2 sides to their experience. Part of them desperately wants to live, right? As humans, we want to overcome what we're experiencing. We want to get through that. Oftentimes we may not have, the support that we think is there or not there, or the tools to be able to do that. So the ambivalence is looking at part of them wants to live, but then the other part of them wants to die or escape the physical, emotional, or combined pain that they're experiencing. Research has informed key strategies in suicide prevention that involve engaging the part of person that wants to stay alive. This helps create distance from the part of them that wants to die. And we do this in a variety of ways, but particularly in having conversation, talking about future hopes, loved ones, good memories. One way that we do to help the person connect with reasons for living at the same time, this decreases the visibility and presence of things around them that may facilitate their desire to die. Next slide. One of the many important things we have learned from research is about the perspective of a suicidal person. And, I often think about this from my experience coming into this work. This is just something that wasn't talked about. Of course, we're discussing a taboo subject today that people are not comfortable speaking about or even learning about sometimes. So being that there's 158 people in this space today is just incredible, because if we come together and we understand the perspective of someone who is thinking about suicide, we understand how to perhaps support them, but also have a direct conversation. And if we are thinking about someone who is experiencing emotional, physical pain, or both, this is when that crisis point has been reached, right? Pain may seem unbearable. And if we think about a time in our life when we were in an incredible amount of pain, maybe it was a broken bone, maybe it was childbirth, that pain literally changes our brain chemistry, right? That pain makes ordinary thinking almost impossible. And so at that moment, we've experienced that pain. It might be absolutely out of the question for us to give accurate and clear directions to someone, even just to get to our house. So if we can imagine that pain that makes that ordinary thinking impossible, someone becomes desperate to escape that pain, right? For someone who is thinking of suicide, thinking becomes constricted at that moment of crisis. A state, if you can imagine, of intense tunnel vision where other options just seem unavailable. Someone who considers suicide cannot foresee a time when that unbearable pain will end, and their thinking becomes limited. So understanding the perspective of a suicidal person has also helped us learn that suicidal feelings are often temporary. They can come on intensely and can sometimes pass in minutes or hours. Keeping people safe and helping them feel supported can get them through those critical moments. So again, there is evidence of putting time and distance between an individual who is suicidal and the means to take their life can literally be a life-saving action. And that is why it's so important that we take the steps when we know someone is struggling to help them stay safe. So looking at the next slide here, who is at risk? As you can imagine, there has been a lot of research around understanding and identifying those that are at higher risk. When we look at this next slide, this chart here, we are looking at three main factors. And risk factors can be defined as characteristics or conditions that increase the chance a person may take their life. And it's important to know these to understand the big picture of someone who is considering suicide. So again, keeping in mind that thinking about suicide is typically not related to one instance or one experience. It's rather multiple converging, complicated factors. And so I want you just to think about for a minute, just like someone who is at risk for heart disease because of high blood pressure or a history of heart disease in their family, some people are at higher risk of suicide than others for similar reasons. So we're going to look at these three categories. There are health factors, historical factors, and environmental factors. And again, these risk factors can converge at different points in someone's life and increase a person's risk for suicidal behavior at particular points in time. So looking at health factors a little closer on the next slide is we are thinking about biological and psychological medical conditions, the most significant of which are mental health conditions. And as I said before, most people who die by suicide have an active mental health condition at the time of their death. And depression is the most common mental health condition and the one that is most associated with suicide. And bipolar disorder is also shown to be at higher risk, although the disorder is less common than depression. And because these conditions put a person at greater risk for suicide, detecting the presence of a mental health condition is critically important. And the best way to be sure is when you are worried about someone, when they are not quite behaving like themselves or saying things that we're used to them saying, it's important that we can detect a change in ourselves or our loved ones or someone that we know in their mental health or emotional well-being. And it's important that we have that knowledge to detect those changes and have an important conversation to find out more. And as you can imagine, many people who are in distress, they don't actually know that they are experiencing risk or a problem that maybe needs intervention or support or help. And being trained in Talk Saves Lives and as helping humans by providing information about how to access mental health care or a crisis number if their distress is high can be a solid step in creating an outlet for them to connect to the help that they need. So moving on to the next slide, think about other health factors. Mental health conditions are not the only health factors that are associated with suicide risk. Here you can see serious and chronic health conditions can increase risk, especially when the person also has mental health conditions. And chronic pain and serious head injuries have also been found to increase risk as well. And the second type of risk factors on the next slide are historical factors. So just like I had mentioned earlier, that someone may be experiencing a family history of a condition, or they also may have life experiences that might elevate their risk for a physical health condition. The same goes for suicide thought as well. Ashley, you can switch the slides. So as you can see here on the slide, of course, people who have a family history of suicide or a family history of mental health conditions may be at higher risk. And we also know that past trauma, such as sexual abuse or combat stress, has also been shown to be increased risk as well. And while most people who attempt suicide do not go on to die by suicide, previous attempts are also considered historical risk factors for suicide and also puts a person at an increased risk as well. And lastly, any loss, whether it's a suicide loss or any other loss that we are experiencing grief for in our lives, can also increase risk for suicidal thinking as well. And lastly, environmental factors on the next slide. These are factors that involve the circumstances of a person's life. Often there are aspects of a person and environment that can contribute to their overall level of risk. So a few most common here is having access to a way of killing oneself is referred to access of lethal means. We also know that research has shown that contagion, which is the exposure to another person's suicide or graphic or sensationalized accounts of suicide, especially among those with other risk factors, can increase risk of suicide as well. And prolonged stress, such as harassment, bullying, relationship problems, legal problems, and unemployment, as well as stressful life events, which vary across the lifespan, and include experiences like divorce, legal problems, or job loss can also increase risk as well. So on our next slide here, to better understand suicide risk, here is an example of a set of risk factors that, again, could converge in a person who is suicidal. This example shows what is often a public perception of suicide, right? On the left here, we see a person who maybe is showing us sadness. Maybe they're not quite acting like themselves. Maybe they're withdrawn. Maybe you can see here on the right, these are some of the things that we might not know, right? By looking at someone or experiencing space with them. You don't know what their genetic risk is. Maybe they've had family members die by suicide. Maybe they've had family members with mental health conditions as well. We also don't know if they're experiencing an active mental health condition, right? Sometimes that's not as obvious as we may think that it is. We oftentimes don't know if someone is experiencing increased stress or overwhelming thoughts and feelings. And then, of course, we oftentimes don't know if someone is using substances to cope with some of the emotional, physical pain that they may be experiencing. And understanding, again, that the key here is the combination of risk factors that could have contributed to suicidal thinking or a loss by suicide. Therefore, while a life event can certainly play a precipitating role in suicidal behavior, without other underlying risk factors, life events alone aren't thought to cause suicide themselves. And lastly, on the next slide, looking into the future, research will help us find the best ways to fight suicide. And research is now looking for biomarkers, things like in testable blood samples that will help us identify those are at our risk. And additionally, a number of clinical treatments like particular types of therapy that are effective for suicidal people, and more need to be developed and studied. But the good news is that through research, we're learning more and more about what helps people during a suicidal crisis. And also, research is helping us identify the most effective programs and interventions to reduce suicide rates and reduce risk in those experiencing mental health conditions. Now, Carrie is going to give you an overview of prevention and what you can do.
Thanks, Victoria. So just like there are risk factors that Victoria just went over that increase a person's risk for suicide, there's also protective factors that lower a person's risk. So we know that if we're proactive about mental health and we really make an effort, right, to get healthier, we're protecting ourselves. So feeling connected, you could go ahead and advance the slide. So feeling connected to family and community support can protect us. When someone's struggling with depression or anxiety, psychosis, substance abuse, these protective factors that may normally be strong can erode, right? They can temporarily weaken. And when that happens, having our friends and our family to remind us of our strengths can be so protective for us. Problem-solving skills also help. We know that life can get tough, right? But being able to see a way through our problems can protect us as well. and our cultural and religious beliefs. They encourage connecting and help seeking, and they really discourage suicidal behavior or create a strong sense of purpose. Next slide. So because mental health care is so important for preventing suicide, we're really going to focus on this for a few moments here. We know that getting effective treatment for mental health conditions like depression or anxiety can prevent suicide. So critical to suicide prevention is getting people connected, right, to mental health treatment. And this is one of the biggest challenges out there, right, is fighting suicide, is getting people to address their mental health on the same way that we would our physical health. In fact, we know that those suffering from a mental health condition, less than half of them are seeking treatment. And one way that we can encourage folks to seek treatment is to treat mental health just like our regular health. If we're going to the doctor because, we broke our arm, if we're suffering with our mental health, we need to go see the doctor as well, right? It's very critical. And we really just need a culture where everyone knows that it's smart just to take care of our mental health. So seeing a mental health professional really is a sign of strength, right? The person that is seeking help should really request, we have to advocate for ourselves and request a full evaluation to figure out, if there really is a mental health condition affecting their life. There are many different types of treatment available, various different kinds of psychotherapy, various different kinds of medication. Through research, we have found that many people with the combination of psychotherapy and medications, that tends to be the most helpful for them. But the most important thing is to find the treatment that works best for the individual. And here, good news right here is that through advocacy works and efforts, that improving access to mental health services so that more people can get the treatment that they need, right? The law now requires insurance plans to cover mental health services right on par with our physical health services. So if we need mental health services, and 1 out of 4 of us will at some point, we should get treated and get our health back on track as fast as we can. So just like we find strategies that optimize our physical health, right, we can do the same for our mental health through our self-care strategies, proper exercise, right, good sleep, our healthy diet, stress management skills. These all can play a critical role in protecting our mental health. And prevention efforts also include support for those touched by suicide. We know that the loss of one person to suicide profoundly impacts so many people. Victoria touched on that a little bit earlier. And it's really important that survivors have the support that they need, both to heal and to really reduce their own risk of suicide as well. And with those with lived experience, those who have attempted suicide or experienced suicidal thinking, they're at an increased risk, right? We need to make sure that they have support that they need too. And for the people who are at a crisis point, the most important thing that we can do between a suicidal person and their way of ending their life is time. And Victoria had touched on this as well. And through research, we know that by temporarily reducing that suicidal persons, their access to lethal means, we give suicidal individuals time, right? Time for that intense suicidal risk to diminish, and time for someone to intervene with mental health support and resources. So the majority of people who experience a suicidal crisis, if they are unable to access their chosen method, even just temporarily, they are unlikely to engage in another action to end their life. Therefore, a clear way to prevent suicide is to limit access to lethal means. So during that period of high risk, we know that the safer the environment is, the better chance the suicidal person has through living through that crisis period, right? So suicide prevention research has looked at a number of different ways to create safer environments, right? Installing CO sensors in cars. So when those carbon monoxide levels get high, it will automatically turn a car off, right? Putting blister packaging for medications. It's really hard to get the medication out of the packaging, putting barriers on bridges, and securing firearms. We know firearm safety is critical to reducing suicide rates. In the United States, firearms are used in roughly half of all suicides, and suicide prevention is a very important part of gun safety education as well. So what can you do? It's really important to have a caring, supportive conversation with someone that you may be worried about, to allow them a time to share what they're experiencing, right? The conversation's a time and a way to show that you care, that you're noticing things, and to gain more information about their levels of distress. You can advance, please. One more. So let's start talking about suicide warning signs, right? Watch for the warning signs in ourselves and in others. While many of those suicide risk factors that we discussed over, they endure over longer periods of time, those warning signs are those observable signs that we're noticing that signal that a suicidal risk could be in the near future. And it's really important to pay attention to both the risk factors that we discussed and the warning signs that we're about to talk about. So if you see warning signs, we need to reach out to those that we're concerned about. And if we're struggling, we need to reach out as well. We need to seek mental health services if we're depressed or if our anxiety is, interfering with our day-to-day life, and encourage others to do the same. So suicide warning signs are typically displayed in three main ways that we can detect, right? Through talk, behavior, and mood. So these are observable changes that we can see in someone that we know. So we're going to go through each one of them in a little bit more detail. So talk. Many people who are suicidal, they talk about ending their lives. It could be directly or indirectly. A person could come and just say it outright, or they might joke about it. Anytime someone is talking about taking their own life, we really need to take it seriously. Some people say that they have no reason to live. Others say things that let you know that they may feel trapped or that they're a burden to others. Or they might just even talk about feeling overwhelmed or being in that unbearable pain. Next slide. Behaviors. Behaviors that are atypical for an individual should also encourage us to reach out to that person that, when we're noticing these things. When people thinking about suicide, they can display all these different things here. There may be an increased use of substance, right? Drugs or alcohol. They may be having trouble sleeping, or maybe that they're sleeping a little bit too much. Maybe they have insomnia too, acting recklessly. They might start withdrawing from activities, especially the ones that they really enjoy a lot. They may start isolating more from families and friends. They also might start looking for a way to kill themselves. They might start looking online for methods, maybe even shopping for a firearm. They may also start giving away their possessions or show a related behavior such as reckless spending. And mood. Their mood's going to change, right? Depression, apathy, rage, irritability, anxiety, right? These are the moods that one would expect, someone who feels overwhelmed and desperate. We all have ups and downs in our lives, and in our mood. But when we're noticing these changes in someone that really seem uncharacteristic or concerning for them, it's really important that we reach out and we speak to them about what we're noticing. For an example, an unexplained happiness after a long period of depression can indicate that that individual has decided on a plan and that they are relieved that they're no longer going to be in pain. And this is one warning sign that is commonly overlooked. And people think that the person is getting better. But like I said, that person has decided on a plan that they will no longer be in pain. So we really need to keep that in mind as well. Okay. And I know that that's a lot of information, but to sum it up, just watch for changes in behavior and trust your instincts. Always assume that you're the only one who's going to reach out to someone. It's not going to help if we have side conversations with, our colleagues instead of reaching out to the person that we're worried about, right? So a rule of thumb is if we're wondering if someone's depressed or if they're anxious, reach out to them. And the same goes for ourselves. If we're having suicidal thoughts, we need to ask for help. If you've reached out before, reach out again. The first time that you reach out, maybe the person that you're reaching out to really isn't receptive. Keep trying. Try talking to someone else or with a professional. And when you're reaching out to someone, if you're asking them, what's going on, even if suicide doesn't seem to be the concern, but maybe they still are in distress, they're going to find comfort that, and supported that you just reached out, that you're caring and that you're listening to them. And that's really important. So how do we reach out to someone? We talk to them in private, right? We listen to their story. We listen non-judgmentally. We express our concerns and that we care. And we're asking directly about suicidal thoughts. And we don't want to be afraid to ask the question, are you thinking of ending your life? It's a very hard question to ask. But like Victoria talked about earlier, is when someone's in crisis, they have that tunnel vision, right? So we want to be direct with our questions. We want to encourage them to seek mental health services. And if they are in crisis, we want to lead them to help, right? We want to take them to help, whether that's to the emergency, department. And there are some things that we want to avoid when we're talking to someone who's suffering from depression or anxiety. We want to avoid minimizing their feelings, right? Those of us who have never experienced depression, we can't understand what it feels like, right? We don't even realize what this person's going through. We want to avoid trying to convince them that life is worth living. If a person is near that crisis point, we know that they're not thinking clearly. So having debates about life they're not helpful at all. So we want to avoid trying to fix it. If a person's having a heart attack, we're not going to be like, hey, you better change your diet. So same thing here. If a person's in crisis, what they need to be is heard and led to help. So we want to listen to them. We want to offer help and find a health professional that could help them. Okay. Next slide. If you think next slide, please. Thank you. If you may think someone may make an attempt on their life soon, we want to stay with them. Do not leave them alone. However, if that situation puts your life at risk, please leave the area immediately and call 911. We want to help them remove lethal means or remove themselves from a potentially dangerous area and escort them to mental health services or to the emergency department. Next slide. We could also help them call the Lifeline or call the Lifeline yourselves, right? The Lifeline 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is manned by trained counselors, and they will tell you what you should do to help that person in distress. If the person does not feel comfortable speaking to a counselor on the phone, they can also text talk to the crisis text line at 741-741. And we always ask everyone, these are two great numbers to have as contacts in your phone. Maybe you may not need them for yourself, but it's a great resource to have in case you need them for someone else. Both lines are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And these are crisis workers. Okay. And for all emergencies, of course, call 911. If there's a suicide attempt in progress, of course, we would call 911. Next slide. Together, we can create a culture that's really smart about mental health. We'll save lives and vastly improve the lives of many more. And we know that it's very simple, but a very powerful idea that talk does save lives. By caring and reaching out, we can all really play a part in suicide prevention. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie. I am going to just take a moment and thank you everyone very much for sharing this space with us to learn more about an introduction to suicide prevention. Talk Saves Lives. And I just wanted to, while we are switching over our PowerPoint, not only thank you for attending, but also to just give everybody just a moment to take some deep breaths in and slow deep breaths out. And inhaling, and as we exhale, maybe count to 4. And then out for 4. And as we do that, if we're thinking some positive, hopeful thoughts for maybe, people that are sharing this space together today and our experiences, maybe also sending out love into the universe for those that might be struggling. And just take just a moment to take some deep breaths as we settle into the final portion of our presentation. Ashley, you can pull up the second PowerPoint. Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. Now, I just want to mention before we start on this, again, this is going to be an overview of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's programming for schools and educators. Of course, if you are not interested in this, you can certainly leave us. And, I thank you all very much for attending, but I do encourage you to stay if you can, because not only are many of these presentations applicable for schools, there are also some community-based programming as well that can be offered for youth groups, after school programs, faith groups, and others that touch young people and educators in the community as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be done in a school district. So I wanted just to start with on the next slide here. Again, thank you very much for joining us for this overview. Of course, Carrie and I both mentioned at the beginning of Talk Saves Lives that we are both facilitators for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP. And the really wonderful thing about AFSP is they offer, yes, Talk Saves Lives, but a continuum of community-based and education curriculums as well. And Carrie and I are going to give you an overview of those today. But first, on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the mission of AFSP. The mission is to save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. And of course, today in AFSP, on the next slide, I wanted just to give you a very brief overview that, of course, AFSP is the leading national non-for-profit organization that is dedicated to suicide prevention, and that is they are sustainable in their practices and what they are offering to communities, and they are fast growing as well. All of their education programs are driven by science. They are evidence informed. And the programming engages those personally affected, mental health professionals, and community leaders as well. And AFSP has invested over $37 million per year in research, education, advocacy, and support for those affected by suicide. On the next slide, you'll see just a very brief overview of the prevention through partnerships here. So just as Ashley gave an overview of NTAC's partnerships at the beginning, all of AFSP's work is demonstrated throughout the country by the power behind the partnerships. You'll get a copy of this slide deck so you can investigate more into the partners. But as you can see here, it's in various systems across the continuum across the country. Okay, so first I want to start off and tell you a little bit about AFSP's walks. So of course, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is a chapter-based organization. So they have chapters all over the country in the United States. And many of these chapters do community-based programming. I am going to throw a link into the chat for all of you. That will help you find your local walk in your community. So you can click that, and there's a beautiful section in there where you can search where you live. And Ashley, you can go back to that next slide. Thank you so much. And the community walks are held in hundreds of cities across the country and are at the core of the Out of the Darkness movement, which began in 2004. These events encourage people to come together, to open up about their connections to the cause. And of course, I actually started our local walk in our community that Carrie is now organizing. And, we held that space for people to come together to not only support the cause and create awareness, but also to remember loved ones that we've lost and to also encourage and support people who may be currently struggling. And this creates a local platform that creates a culture that, again, just like we just talked about in Talk Saves Lives, is smarter about mental health, opens doors for conversation, for connection, for resource sharing as well, and to also let people that they're not alone. And I also wanted to mention that there are also campus walks as well. So if it's not a community-based walk, there are also campus walks, and then there's also an overnight walk as well. All right, so I encourage you to check those out. They happen right now at this time in the fall. So, if you are involved in your local Out of the Darkness walk, or, you've had experience there, I'd love to hear about it into the chat if you're willing to drop some of that information. All right, so our next portion of our overview is about AFSP resources. So again, finding a local chapter is at the link I just posted. And you can also find many resources that AFSP offers at no cost. And there's going to be like lots of links happening in the chat, but we just want to make sure everyone has the information. So on the next slide, there's a bunch of resources available to schools, and this is all sorts of general information that you can use in a variety of manners. We are looking at lifesaver cards, which are small cards that are designed to easily fit in someone's wallet, and it has a wealth of important information. This has information about warning signs, how to have a conversation, as well as important links and phone numbers to have on hand for emergencies. In addition to that, Carrie also spoke about the 988 National Suicide Prevention Crisis Line. There are wallet cards available, posters, wristbands, buttons, stickers, also brochures that talk about community programming available. And there's also, if you're familiar with Seize the Awkward campaign, there are posters and stickers as well that can be distributed throughout schools, hung up in community organizations, common areas. And if you don't know about that campaign, Carrie is going to tell you about that in just a couple of minutes. And on the next slide, if we're getting into more prevention and programming, there is a model school district policy that is available to you on AFSP's website. We'll drop that link into the chat in just a moment. Carrie, thank you. This provides educators and school administrators a comprehensive way to implement suicide prevention policies in their local community. There's a hard copy that you can order, but also a digital version. And this is a collaboration between the American School Counselor Association, the National Association of School Psychologists, and the Trevor Project. The program is research-based and easily adaptable for middle and high schools. And there are specific actionable steps that support school personnel, such as sample language for student handbooks, suggestions on involving parents and guardians in school suicide prevention, and guidance on how to address in-school suicide attempts as well. And so this is a really important piece, and oftentimes is a mandated policy that schools have to have, depending on what state that you're in. And thank you very much. And also, this is easily adaptable for your community and the school needs as well. All right, moving on to the next slide. There's also an After a Suicide toolkit as well that is available for schools. This helps school communities that have lost someone to suicide put in place best practices as well as practical tools to support healing after this loss. And there's information specifically on how to best communicate and support the local school community and manage the crisis response. Oftentimes, especially in the work that Carrie and I have been involved in, we sometimes find that schools are not prepared for the I want to say just the complicated aspects of talking with students, talking with parents and guardians, also media and those that are looking for further information, and having this in place ahead of time can ensure that everyone is prepared to take the steps to keep everyone safe and support healing. Ashley, your screen changed. And so this information helps students cope, gives information on communication with parents, working with the community, as well as engaging external resources for support as well. Okay, next slide here. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the training of our school programs. And I'm going to turn this over to Carrie to give you an update on this and also her experience with our local chapter here in Western New York. But are there any questions at all before we put that over to Carrie? Let me check the Q&A here. Okay. All right, Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you have questions, please feel free to either private message me or put into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those as Carrie speaks. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. Okay, so now we'll go over the programming that AFSP has for schools. So as you can see, they have quite a few programs, right? At It's Real Middle School and It's Real High School. More Than Sad for parents, and then More Than Sad for teachers and other school personnel. It's Real College, Seize the Awkward campaign. We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. Each and Every Day Film, and then Talk Saves Lives, which we just went over. Okay. So next slide, please. It's Real Middle School and It's Real High School. Very similar. But it's intended for middle school and high school classes, right? Or even in a community setting with groups of teens. It's about a 45-minute program that provides young people with mental health education and resources. It raises awareness about mental health issues, how to start that conversation about mental health, and the importance of self-care and how to reach out for help and who to reach out to. Next slide, please. Okay, so this program really focuses on reaching out for the support when struggling and encouraging other folks to reach out as well and having that honest conversation, right? We talk about what does treatment look like, because a lot of people are afraid of the unknown. How to reach out, who are the trusted adults in your school or in your life? What is self-care for you, really? Right? We talk about self-care, but then we try to identify it, personally for each person. We talk about the signs if someone's struggling, just like we did in Talk Saves Lives, right? What's treatment, right? So we go over a lot of the same stuff from Talk Saves Lives, but just a little different for our teens. Next slide, please. So training for presenters. If you'd like to become a presenter, then next slide, you'll get the following things in a little toolkit, right? To meet important goals, you get included the PowerPoint presentation with the speaker script. They ask that you just read directly from the script if you'd like. They don't want you to really deviate from the script. Usually after you do it a few times, you kind of get the gist of it, right? You get a resource list handout for the participants. It's about 45 to 60 minutes long. You could do it in person or virtual with a max of 50 participants. When we do this programming, we ask that there's 2 adults. Actually, we try to have 2 presenters. If you can't have 2 presenters, we'd like to have the presenter and a resource person, someone that's always scanning the room. If someone is activated in any way, or if someone needs to step out, they can speak with them at that time. Or, in my case, if I'm going with, one of my colleagues and we're presenting, then we could have a conversation with the teacher after we're presenting to reach out to that student to follow up with them. Okay. And we usually do Q&A after. And you could always adjust this. We know that class times vary depending on districts. So there is a way to shorten the presentation or split it up into 2 class periods. Okay. Presenter materials. You will get the slide deck with the speaker notes, the implementation guide, and that instructs, the instructions. It's equipped with the tips for preparing to present and planning the presentation. Within the guide is the sample email pitch that you can use to spread the word about It's Real. You get edible flyers. So you'll get one to promote the event, and then one that tells about the event, and then that resource list handout. And we like to say, look at your local resources that you have for maybe your behavioral health clinics, and local resources, as well as the national resources that are available to youth. Okay. Now we move on to More Than SAD for parents and teachers. More Than SAD used to be the programming that we used for middle school age youth, but it got to be a little outdated. So we removed that from the youth platform, but it's still good for parents and teachers and other school personnel. Okay. So the goal for parents here, this program is about 75 minutes long. It comes with a PowerPoint and a short film. So the learning objectives for this is parents will recognize mental health concerns, how to initiate that conversation with their teen, and how to get them help and access to treatment. And then the goals for teachers and other school personnel. Now, this program is a little longer. It lasts about 120 minutes. And this includes the video, the PowerPoint presentation, can be delivered virtually or in person. Of course, your audience is high school teachers and other personnel that work in the district. And this suicide prevention program, it does comply with the requirements for teacher education training in many states. This is for ages 18 and up, and it's recommended for a maximum of 30 folks at a time. Okay. Learning objectives here will recognize mental health concerns, the warning signs for suicide, and referring at-risk students. So here are the materials that you will receive for the teacher. You'll receive the items as part of the training package for the teacher program. Again, this is perfect for staff development day or other professional development offering for the staff. Okay. It's real. College students, mental health. I like this program. This could be used for high school seniors getting ready to go off into college. This is great for college students as well. It's a 20-minute documentary highlighting 3 students and their struggles with mental health and their adjustment to college life. It really teaches participants to recognize those signs of depression in themselves and in others, those challenges, existing with stigma surrounding depression. It demystifies that treatment process as well. So that the film is about 20 minutes, and then there's talking points that come in the pack, right? So the talking, I guess it would be about 40 to 60 minutes to talk, to have that guided discussion with the group. Again, that could be virtual or in person. So this would be anyone 16 years old or older with a maximum attendees of 50. And here it is, Seize the Awkward campaign. This is a public service digital first campaign brought to you by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And this was developed in partnership with the JED Foundation and the Ad Council. It really aims at encouraging young adults to create that safe space for their friends to open up about mental health and to prepare them for how to support a friend in need. The campaign uses an upbeat tone to personify an awkward silence that nobody likes, right? That could happen between friends before a conversation about mental health. This is a really great resource for announcements during Suicide Prevention Month, also during Mental Health Awareness Month. This is also great to use during during a health class as well. And you get the Seize the Awkward toolkit. You get the fact sheet, talking points, do's and don'ts, and the brand guidelines. Seize the Awkward uses influencers that young people are aware of to really drive home that mental health is real, that they suffer with mental health, and that it should be taken seriously, and that we need to reach out to our friends and let our friends know that, maybe we struggle with it too. And that we reach out to who our trusted adults are in the school, right? And to just have those conversations amongst each other. So it's a really great campaign, Seize the Awkward. Each and every day, film screening for seniors and college students. This is a little intense. This was developed in partnership with MTV Films and the JED Foundation. They started this before COVID. They started filming, and then once COVID hit, they went to the online Zoom platform to finish out the film. It's 59 minutes, and this captures the story of 9 young individuals with lived experience. For this program can be used for high school seniors, college students, staff, and parents. This film can be activating due to discussions of their struggles, suicide attempts, diagnoses, and all the folks in this film, they talk to each other about their struggles, right? And they talk about normalizing, having conversations about mental health. They also share how they're coping, right? And how their families reacted to their struggles, right? Good and bad. We ask that there are 2 to 3 support people in the room while presenting this. It could be activating for many people. So we ask also for about 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A after this presentation. I think this is a great film, but this is just another one added to the AFSP list. And then we move back to Talk Saves Lives. This is AFSP's flagship suicide prevention education program, right? This covers the scope of the leading cause of death, what the key research has found to be the warning signs and risk factors of suicide, and strategies that prevent it. This is 45 to 60 minutes long. You get that PowerPoint presentation, be delivered virtually or in person. It is a great general program to really present, to establish building relationships, and to offer more programs. This could be presented to anyone over the age of 18. We ask that the size here, the audience size is about 30 to 50. And Talk Saves Lives also has specialized modules for certain populations. They have older adults. They just released Black and Brown communities, Spanish speaking. They have EMS fire. They have corrections, and they just released firearm community. So they're really, reaching out to a bunch of different communities that we have. And then Talk Saves Lives facilitator guide. So this is everything that you'll get the PowerPoint, the facilitator guide with the notes, talking points, that editable flyer to promote the presentation. And then you also get a 30-second PSA to help promote it as well. Everything is pretty detailed out in all of the packets that you get for any of the curriculums.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. And Ashley, you could go all the way to the last pink slide. And so first of all, I wanted to thank everybody so much for this opportunity to not only share with you something that Carrie and I just absolutely cherish presenting in communities, not only in our hometown here in Western New York, but across the country, and also sharing a little bit about our stories and ourselves as lost survivors. And, thank you all so much for sharing this space for us, and also be willing to come into this space to talk about something that is difficult. And, a lot of people in society do consider to be a taboo subject, and just knowing that we can all make an incredible difference if we are able just to have a direct and open conversation with someone. So I just wanted to thank you all for that. And we also wanted to ensure that everyone had tons of resources to be able to engage in programming in your local communities, because the more people that know about this and that want to be facilitators and that, give out the information, the more people that will have awareness and that will feel comfortable in having these conversations. And we will just be a suicide safer country as well. So I think I've answered all of your questions in the chat that have either come in publicly or privately. So I am just going to open it up for conversation or question, particularly around either the information that we presented for Talk Saves Lives or the material. If you have specific questions around if you're supporting someone or if you need more resources, I recommend 2 avenues. Either please jump over to a breakout room and Arctellos will support you and get you some information, or please private message myself or Carrie. But we would like to answer any questions regarding the material that we covered today. I'm going to just check the chat here. Okay. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that, of course, if you're interested in becoming a facilitator, I did put a link earlier into the chat around finding your local chapter, but Carrie's email is in the chat, preventsuicidechq@gmail.com. And you can email her directly and she can help get you connected to your local chapter to either find those free paper resources or to get you connected to the director that can help support you to become a facilitator in any or all of the programming that we highlighted for you today. Okay. Carrie, do you want to take this question in the chat here from, oh my goodness, the chat. I can't even keep up with it. How do you know when the crisis period has ended, from Yvonne?
Well, as a helper, right? Because we're just helpers, we're not the professionals. We're the connectors to help. So if someone is in crisis, we have to get someone else involved, and they have to make that decision if the crisis is over for that person. We can't be the ones to make that decision. I wouldn't feel comfortable personally saying that, oh, this person is no longer in crisis. I believe that's what a professional would do. In many communities, there are, if you call 988, many communities have mobile crisis teams that come out. But 988 is such a wonderful resource. They will talk to you, or they'll talk to the person in crisis and talk to them about what's happening and what's going on, to try to help, deflate what's happening in the moment, to give you time to get them to the emergency department. I hope that's helpful. I hope that answered your question. Facilitators are not paid. All AFSP trainings are free of charge.
Yep, the facilitators are volunteer.
Mhm.
Now, I do want to mention that depending on like some job, some roles, some jobs, Carrie and I were really lucky where we work and support a local suicide prevention coalition. So doing these trainings is part of our job, our role. So it just depends on your particular circumstance or situation, but typically volunteer. Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure that we all know I will be sending PDF versions of both presentations, Talk Saves Lives, and also the programming to you all. We'll also gather all of the links, so you have those as well. But if you do visit the afsp.org, there's a lot of information on there, particularly about warning signs and resources on all of the programming as well. Okay. Let's see here. I want to make sure I get to all of the questions.
With warning sign, not enjoying things they usually enjoy. How does this apply to people who are usually depressed and don't really have things they usually enjoy? Asking for a friend. Well, I would hope that this person is seeking counseling, or has other resources that they're connected to at that point. Because this is important. We know that if you are struggling with your mental health, more than 3 weeks, that you should be reaching out for other supports, because it's affecting your day-to-day life. So if this is affecting someone's day-to-day life, they need to get supports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alyssa, I would also mention, as well as you mentioned the warning sign, not enjoying things they usually enjoy, but you also mentioned depression is present with that person. So those are 2 warning signs, right? We're looking at someone who has lost interest in things that they normally enjoy, but also someone who is experiencing signs and symptoms of depression. And so with that, of course, also knowing that depression is one of the most significant mental health conditions that someone may experience suicidal thinking. I would definitely have conversations with that person on connecting them to local resources, maybe asking a direct question if there are other warning signs present about their level of suicidal thinking as well. But for sure, I would definitely recommend that person to connect with others, whether either for more support or further conversation as well. I'm probably missing some things in the chat because it's moving so quickly. Carrie,
I'm getting some of them.
Yes, Amber, How do we request materials, become a facilitator or presenter? Great question. I'm gonna drop a link into the chat, and what you would need to do is find your local chapter. And you can do that through this link right here, and you would need to speak with your area director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and let them know your hopes and intentions, and they will work with you on either getting those resources or engaging in facilitation training. Okay.
Do you provide any resources regarding the LGBTQIA+ and best practices to reduce suicide risk? AFSP does have materials on their website for that, for the LGBTQIA+ community.
And I'm trying to find those in real time.
Let me see.
Oh, here we go. I got it.
You got it? Okay, because I have it.
I'm going to just put that into that. Carrie, can you look and see if there are any other questions?
I'm sure.
And I also want to mention, while Carrie is looking at the chat, is of course we're highlighting American Foundation for Suicide Prevention today because we're both facilitators, and it's of course National Suicide Prevention Month. But I want to be really clear that this isn't the only organization that is doing prevention work, or there's resources. There are many other wonderful national organizations and local organizations that you can certainly engage with as well. So if you have been keeping up with the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, NTAC's Friday e-newsletter, we have been sharing national suicide prevention resources and information through that. And there has been a lot shared that you can engage with in your own local community. And so I definitely recommend checking that resource out. And Ashley, of course, I'm going to need to know if maybe those are on NTAC's website, and we can also share that out with the group when we share the information out as well.
Do we have any resources that are available for other languages? If you go to the AFSP website, up in the top right corner, you can switch it to other languages. And I believe that they will all transfer into the specific language you're looking for. Are these programs considered EVPs? I don't think I heard that stated.
They're evidence informed. Yep. Okay. You are welcome.
I think that is it.
Okay. All right. Well, it's about 1:30 my time, our time. And if we have missed your question, please email Carrie, and I will put both of our emails back into the chat. But I definitely encourage everyone to join our newsletter through NTAC. Ashley just put that into the chat. We'll also send a plethora of resources and links your way, along with PDFs of both of the presentations. And there's also a website, a SurveyMonkey, excuse me, in the chat that we'd love for you to complete to let us know how we did today. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. It was amazing to see 170 people at one point sharing space to learn more about suicide prevention. Incredible, and hopeful, that there are that many more people in our country today that have additional information to support people in themselves. Carrie, any last words from you?
Yes, thank you all so much. This has been wonderful.
Have a great day, everyone. Please email if you have any questions.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.